I didn't leave investor. She still does stuff like this. She still sends me like stuff. I usually just go in and like it and say anything. Weird. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe that's for their testimony and leaving on good terms.
So I think we're going to get started. Hi, everybody. If you're getting sex, continue to get the keys. We're going to start the program.
It's on the right side of the
Give you
building.
People are ready. Okay, I'll try to do that. The contest is happening. You thought me as close as they could. We've got a good person on. So, okay, hi everybody. My name is Michael. Thank you all so much for coming out. This is the first event that we're doing this night, at least in a very long time. This is I Bird, I Vote, Southeast Pennsylvania. I'm Michael Selleck. I'm the Executive Director. I know most of you, but it's great to see some new faces out for this. I'm the Executive Director of Bucks County Audubon Society at Honey Hollow. That's where we all are right now. Thank you for coming out on the school night. We have these wonderful people we have policy experts for you on environmental advocacy topics who are all specific to our region. So we're going to hear from Tess Wilson, who is right here. Tess, you can wave and let them see you if you want to. Tess is from Audubon Mid-Atlantic, and we'll talk about the regional efforts to pursue I Bird, I Vote, which is a national Audubon initiative which we're kind of advancing here locally. So then we're going to hear from Ezra Thrush of PennFuture. And here we have Tim Hayes from the Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania, among other things. So each of our experts are going to speak for maybe 15 minutes, give or take. And then we'll have a chance to ask some questions, and we'll return to mingling after we have a chance to talk to all three of them together. And please, thank you for taking the cookies, and the coffee is coming out in a minute. And we have cheese and crackers and good stuff like that. So please help yourself as we move along throughout the night, so the staff won't have to eat it all by ourselves. So just a reminder, I think most of you know this, but we're here every day. The center is open. This is the center that we're inside now, open from 9 to 3 on weekdays, and the trails, 7 miles or so of walking trails, are open every day from dawn to dusk. So it's something you can't see at night, so come back in the daytime. You're all welcome back here every day if you want to come. And in the most serious way possible, when you're leaving tonight, please watch out for deer, because we have pretty serious deer problems in Sullivan. So I'm going to introduce Tess. Tess is the Network Engagement Manager at Audubon Mid-Atlantic. She supports the important work that the chapters like us do, and provides tools and resources to conservation advocates in our region, such as us and our other friends here. And like me, Tess also has a background as a professional librarian. So please welcome Tess Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Here. Hi, just as Michael said, my name is Tess Wilson. I'm the Network Engagement Manager for Audubon Mid-Atlantic, coming to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania tonight. It's truly my pleasure. I'm just thrilled to be here with everyone. This is sort of our agenda for tonight. As Michael said, we'll hear from both Tim and Ezra, and then I just have a few questions. We'll do a light panel, but I want to leave a lot of time for you folks to ask questions and to mingle afterwards, eat all the cheese, etc. So I just wanted to give us an overview to sort of set the stage for why we are doing this event, what Audubon Mid-Atlantic does in the region. And so I wanted to start at a high level with the National Audubon Flight Plan. So this is a pretty detailed view of what the flight plan, which is our strategic plan for 2023 to 2028. And these are the milestones that we hope to reach across the Americas. So Audubon is trying to reach these goals through these avenues: habitat conservation, climate action, policy, and community building. So a lot of what I do is in the policy and community building work. I work with the chapters and primarily through a policy lens. But this is sort of the big, huge reason why Audubon does what it does. And this is the I Bird, I Vote campaign. So the phrase I Bird, I Vote actually started with the first I Bird, I Vote Day of Action. It was organized by Audubon Maryland, which is now part of Audubon Mid-Atlantic, in 2016. And in 2016, Audubon staff and the Chesapeake Audubon chapter helped plan a big day of action and advocacy around the 2016 Maryland General Assembly. That event has continued every year and has grown, and it just draws more and more people, more and more officials. It's a really awesome event that happens in Maryland. And National Audubon liked it so much that they decided to use the language for a national campaign, because we know that the best way to protect birds in the places they need is to make sure that folks vote this year and always. So as part of this campaign, there's an I Bird, I Vote pledge you can sign on to. It just pledges nothing more than the fact that you will vote on or before November 5th of this year. And that link is right there. You can also just find it if you Google I Bird, I Vote National Audubon Society. And this campaign also has information about registering to vote, finding your polling place, making a voting plan. So if you're part of an organization or an Audubon chapter, but they also have really great shirts. Someone in the crowd is wearing one tonight. But they have really great merch. They have pins and stickers and posters. So if you are in an organization or a chapter that could use some of those supplies, or you want to put on an I Bird, I Vote event, you can. You have access to all that material. Essentially, this is just our national effort to encourage folks to join bird lovers across the country to get your ducks in a row and make a plan to vote. So that's sort of what it looks like nationally. But if we take a state view, this is our chapter network. We have 19 chapters in Pennsylvania and over 60,000 members represented. So that could be members of National Audubon, of local chapters. But this map also points out the nature centers that we have. We have two near this area, one in Philadelphia, the Discovery Center, and another, the John James Audubon Center, which is in Audubon, Pennsylvania. And this is how our flight plan is reflected at a regional level in Pennsylvania and also in Maryland. We promote healthy forestry and bird-friendly forestry practices through trainings and close work with government entities, especially here in Pennsylvania. We do a lot of work in the Delaware River watershed, conserving habitat, with a lot of help from volunteers, and continuing to advocate for funding and legislation that allows that work to continue. As you saw on that map, we have those centers. They offer a really robust schedule of workshops, bird walks, events like this. They do a lot of education and outreach with local partners. We also focus on coastal habitat restoration and conservation, which looks different in Pennsylvania than it does on the eastern shore of Maryland, say, but coasts are a really vital part of the ecosystem in our region that we work really hard to protect. And of course, as you saw in our flight plan, renewable energy is a huge part of what we do. We advocate for the swift adoption of properly sited solar, continued and expanded funding of DCNR and DEP, and we advocate for legislation that will move us away from reliance on fossil fuels, because we know a better world for people is a better world for birds. And this is kind of what that all looks like on the ground. So we build and participate in coalitions, including our Solar PA, the Growing Greener Coalition, the Clean Power Coalition. We share information that helps educate lawmakers. We testify at bill hearings. We collaborate with chapters and our broader network to write op-eds and letters to the editor. We also write letters of support that we distribute to our network as well, which is something we're really going to ramp up next year. So keep an eye out for that. And together with our chapter network and through partnerships with environmental and community groups, we plan advocacy days and field trips, and also virtual webinars that address those issues and how folks can advocate. And if you happen to be heading to Central PA next week, I know it's far away, but if you drove this far tonight, we can join our forestry team for a healthy forest management trip at Ryder Park. We're really excited about offering more and more of these healthy forest management walks. Really great way to not only see a new forest maybe new to you, but also get to tap into the expertise that exists with our forest team. They're really smart and really fun to listen to when they talk about healthy forest management. And we also just added a legislative tracker to our website. You can find it at pa.audubon.org, and it's in the conservation drop-down menu. A lot of organizations have similar trackers, but we wanted to offer one that was specifically aimed at bird lovers. So you can find bird-specific talking points, how this legislation would help birds in Pennsylvania. You can find that language in that tracker, and feel free to borrow it, use it as you advocate for birds in Pennsylvania. That's why we built it. And this will continue to be updated through future sessions to reflect the status of bills that we support. We won't be able to include every bill in there. This will just kind of outline our priorities for the seats for the session, but do keep an eye on that tracker. And again, use other organizations' trackers in conjunction with that. Wanted to give an overview of some recent wins in Pennsylvania. Community solar passed the House, which is great, but there's still advocacy to be done. We have some postcards here tonight that we're sending to Pennsylvania senators. If you'd like to sign one, please do. There's a QR code to find your senator, and you can just hand those to me at the end of the night. No pressure, but if you do feel like signing one, that'd be great. We also have a one-pager about HB 1842, which is the community solar. The Carbon County Water Farms and Land referendum passed recently that will establish a conservation program to preserve open space, clean water, and wildlife habitat in Carbon County. And it will also allow the county to borrow up to $10 million over 20 years to support that work. That was a big win in Carbon County. In early July, Governor Shapiro and the Pennsylvania legislature finalized a $47 billion state budget that included a lot of priorities for birds and the Audubon community. We will probably get into some of those wins tonight, but a lot of really great advocacy wins for birds in Pennsylvania. And actually, I wanted to say too, in 2023 to 2024, we had over 2,000 Audubon members sign our action alerts, which is huge. And a lot of this work really could not happen without advocates like you. And looking ahead to 2025, our priorities will remain the same. We're going to touch on a lot of these tonight, I think, so I won't go into too much detail, but keep an eye out for more work with our healthy forestry and habitat conservation priorities, riparian buffer protection, our healthy outdoors for all initiatives, and just identifying and supporting sustained funding. And again, we can't do this without you. Birds need you to be their advocate. You all know this because it's why you're here. But talk to your neighbors and friends about it. Sign on to sign-on letters. And also vote. That's why we're all here tonight. And that is it from me. I'm going to leave this on the screen and hand it over to Tim.
So, Tim, I have a brief introduction written for you that I didn't get to.
Oh, cool.
But I will introduce Tim,
Yeah.
so this is Tim Hayes. Tim is the state policy manager for conservation voters of Pennsylvania. Tim has a bachelor's in history with a minor in criminal justice from Temple and a master's in public administration from Westchester. Tim previously served in the Pennsylvania Army National Guard for 6 years as a fire control specialist. Previously served on the board for Peace Valley Nature Center and currently serves as president of Dublin Borough Council. Thanks for coming.
Cool. Thanks, all. Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Tim Hayes, and I forgot to mention, as of last week, I actually got promoted, so I am now the state policy manager for conservation voters of PA, formerly the policy analyst. So just to get a quick background on CVPA, we are a 501c4 environmental nonprofit dedicated to clean air, water, and land. And we accomplish this through legislative work, political work, and digital communications. I also previously served as our Upper Bucks County field coordinator for about a year. So through that work, I've developed a pretty in-depth understanding both on the local level and the state level of what issues are exactly affecting the county and the legislative landscape in Harrisburg. So I know Tess kind of touched on it already, but in this past budget, we did have some really great wins I just wanted to touch on very briefly. First being House Bill 1032, which is the Solar for Schools grant program. That allocated $25 million that community colleges, public school districts, intermediate units, vocational schools can utilize to apply for grant funding to then install solar energy on their properties, whether it be on their rooftops or on any land that they might own. Which is great because it's great for Pennsylvania's decarbonization goals, and it also helps us expand our energy portfolio a little bit more with more alternative sources. So we also had the Agricultural Innovation Grant Program that allocated about $10 million that farmers can use to apply a couple of different technologies and other practices on their farms. So we're talking energy efficiency technology, greenhouse gas reduction emissions. We're talking land and water conservation, best management practices for reducing harmful runoff. That was enacted through House Bill 2310. We have a couple million, I think just over $10 million for abandoned well plugging. This is something that's primarily an issue in the western and northeastern part of the state, primarily in, the coal communities, the former mining communities, that sort of thing. We also secured about an 11% funding increase for the Department of Environmental Protection, which is very significant. Nowhere near where we need to be, but DEP has seen a shortage in staffing for several years, and that's kind of inhibited their ability to enforce several of their regulations and really cool programs that they have. So that was a huge win for us. And then on the local level, we also had some pretty good wins too. I'm sure a lot of y'all saw earlier this year, the commissioners actually filed a lawsuit against some of the world's biggest oil companies for their roles in exacerbating the devastating effects of climate change, and I believe that's still ongoing right now. The Planning Commission also introduced their Bucks 2040 Comprehensive Vision Plan. So a county has to submit a comprehensive vision plan to the state every 10 years. I think it was kind of delayed this time because of COVID, but that includes a lot of really exciting initiatives for sustainable practices on county-owned properties. And we're very lucky. All three of our commissioners are huge environmentalists, two Democrats and a Republican. So we're very lucky to have commissioners who are dedicated to the environment here. We had some really good wins on the local and state level, but with every win, we have about 5 things that set us back. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on here today. So first thing I wanted to focus on a couple water issues that are affecting us here in Bucks County. The first thing is PFAS contamination. PFAS is a acronym for a very long chemical that I can't pronounce, but the general gist of it is a man-made chemical. It's also dubbed a forever chemical because it has a very long potency and contamination rate. And PFAS enters our waterways and our drinking systems through several different ways, whether that be wastewater discharge, industrial discharge, different consumer products and industrial products that are discarded in the wilderness. There's a couple of different ways that PFAS can enter it. And what happens is when all this PFAS is discarded, it then accumulates in our soil and our water, which can lead to several different chronic health effects like developmental issues in young folks, immune system suppression, and most notably certain types of cancer. So the biggest source of PFAS contamination, not only in Bucks County, but in the entire United States, actually comes from the Biddle Air Force National Guard base over in Horsham. So the main reason for that being is that there used to be, I don't think there is anymore, but there used to be a detachment of military firefighters based there that used a Class B firefighting foam that contained PFAS chemicals because it had a stronger ability to put fires out. And what happened is when they were training with this firefighting foam consistently, it seeped into the soil and the groundwater there. And neighboring Warminster Township is actually considered the PFAS capital of the United States due to its high potency. There was also a pretty severe PFAS contamination in East Rock Hill Township up in Upper Bucks County. Back in the 1980s, there was a Berkey's tires that caught on fire, and what happens when you burn a tire? It burns for a significant amount of time, and this was an entire store full of them. So it took over 30 different fire companies to put it out, one of which being the military firefighters from Biddle Air Force Base. And the firefighting foam that was used for that fire back in the 80s is still detectable in the groundwater in that area to this day. So that really shows that its potency is an issue that's not going to go away unless there are strong regulations and legislation against it. So, I kind of mentioned that, there are several different chronic health defects that can come from PFAS contamination, and there have been several studies done to really determine what exactly that means and how exactly it's affecting people. So there was a study done by the U.S. Geologic Survey last year that I believe is still ongoing right now, but what it revealed is that there were very severe levels of PFAS in surface water all throughout the county, especially in Warminster. And it far exceeded the EPA's hazard index for safe drinking water. Of that study, it said that 76% of sampled water had PFAS that was still detectable to this day. And there's also discovered that there was a huge PFAS contamination in the Neshaminy Creek as well, which is one of the largest watersheds in the county. So that is very significant. There was also a blood testing initiative sponsored by the CDC. There are just over 1,000 residents in that study right now, and I believe it's still ongoing. But there has been some early data that has been released, and of that early data, it showed 573 adults and 25 children. And of those people that were tested in those early results, almost every single person had some level of PFAS contamination in their blood. So some of it was actually so severe that it prompted swift recommendations for cancer and colitis screenings because that's how much PFAS was in their systems. There was also a study done this year between February and March where water providers who have at least 350 customers had to test their water infrastructure for PFAS contaminations. And of those water providers, 19% of them had PFAS levels that not only were above the federal standard, but were also above the state standard too, which is much higher. So just to give some context on that, the federal standard for PFAS is 4 parts per trillion, and the state regulation is about 14 parts per trillion, if I'm remembering correctly. So of those entities that were tested, unfortunately, the entity that had the highest level of PFAS contamination was Central Bucks East High School. That had 23 parts per trillion, which is, like I said, way above the state standard. Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority had 22 parts per trillion. Doylestown Township Water Authority had 19 parts per trillion, and Northampton Water Authority had 18 parts per trillion. So as you can see, there has been definitely some good strides in recent years to recognize the dangers of PFAS and address it, but we're still nowhere where we need to be to address the levels of contamination that we're seeing. So on the state level, there are several bills right now that do address PFAS. Fortunately, Ezra, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see any of them going anywhere this session, but a few of them I just wanted to highlight really quick. 2 are from State Representative Greg Scott out of Montgomery County, who's also a firefighter. He introduced House Bill 2238, which would ban the use of PFAS in certain consumer products. So believe it or not, a lot of consumer products sold in stores do contain pretty alarming levels of PFAS. So we're talking non-stick cookware is one of the most notable ones. There are several food products packaging that have PFAS. Is anyone here a fan of microwave popcorn? Yeah, well, it's good. I would go ahead. If you do, I would say go ahead and throw those out because all those microwave popcorn bags have PFAS in them. That's one of the biggest sources of contamination. There's also PFAS in hygiene products. So we're talking menstrual products. We're talking dental floss. It's a lot of products you wouldn't think would have such a dangerous chemical in them. Very, very much do. So House Bill 2238 seeks to ban the production and the distribution of all those products that do have PFAS in them. Unfortunately, it won't go anywhere this session, but it did get the conversation started. Also from Representative Scott is House Bill 1571, which would require any firefighting equipment that contains PFAS, there needs to be a warning label for it so that fire companies can know ahead of time if the contaminant is in it, so then they can use it. They can then go to other sources for their personal protection equipment. Because a lot of fire coats, a lot of fire pants, a lot of helmets do contain PFAS in them as well, since it's so effective in combating flames and everything. There's also Senate Bill 144, which was introduced by Senator Gene Yaw. So Conservation Voters of PA actually originally opposed this bill because it's well intentioned. It restricts the use of Class B firefighting foam that contains PFAS, but it doesn't outright ban it. So our philosophy behind that was, if you pass a bill that restricts it but doesn't outright ban it, that doesn't really solve the problem. You know what I mean? It's just a Band-Aid on the larger issue, and it wouldn't really prevent industries and other providers from not using PFAS in the future. So thankfully, thanks to State Representative Jared Solomon, who's the chair of the House Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee, he did amend that bill pretty significantly that does outright ban the use of the firefighting foam. And it is in the State House right now. It probably won't see full implementation just based on the amount of session days we have left, but it does get the ball rolling in the right direction. And a lot of Republicans are on board with it, as are Democrats. So we're excited to continue that conversation going into the new year. There's also been a pretty significant effort by State Representative Brian Monroe in the 144th District to kind of bring this to the attention of other legislators. Representative Monroe actually lives in Warminster Township, and he is himself a cancer survivor. He really credits that cancer diagnosis to the PFAS levels that he had in his drinking water and everything. And he's been doing a lot of different hearings. He's been doing other meetings with other legislators to get the conversation going too. So on the state level, there's definitely a lot of different things that the legislature is exploring, and we're excited to continue that into the next session. So shifting away from PFAS for a second, I also wanted to touch very briefly on the effort to reform Act 12. So Act 12 was passed back in 2016, and that basically allowed public water systems to have their assets valued, and it also let them determine what their revenue streams and repair costs might be. And this led to several high value acquisitions of public water and sewer systems all throughout the state. I'm sure you're all thinking back to 2022 when Aqua Pennsylvania actually attempted to buy the Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority for over $1 billion. And I was still a field coordinator at that time. And when I was organizing against it, I saw that there was universal backlash against that. We're talking Democrats, Republicans, independents, environmental advocates, transparency advocates. Everyone was united in opposition against that sale. And there's a lot of good reasons why you would be against it. The first being that a lot of these high value acquisitions have led to substantial increases in rates for water and sewer systems. The Chester Water and Sewer Authority over in Delaware County, I believe they sold their water and sewer system, and they've seen exorbitant rate increases. Actually, I think right here in New Hope, I believe New Hope's water and sewer is serviced by Aqua Pennsylvania. My parents-in-law actually live in New Hope, and they said they've seen their water rates go up like 200% in the past 5 years. It's devastating, especially for low-income folks on fixed incomes. Even just beyond the rate increases, though, when a public water and sewer system goes private, there's not nearly as much transparency as there would be if it was public, because a private company isn't required to have public meetings. They're not necessarily required to publish their standard operating procedures. So there definitely is a decrease in transparency if it were to be made private. And not to mention the environmental concerns as well, because what private companies are always going to do if they have an opportunity to cut corners, they're going to cut corners, right? So that could lead to maybe some accidental discharges. They wouldn't be as inclined to, reduce their PFAS levels in their infrastructure if they have it. So between rate increases, environmental concerns, and transparency concerns, everyone was united in opposition against it. And thankfully that deal did die because all three commissioners came out in opposition to it. So thankfully that's off the table for now. So on the state level regarding Act 12, there is a package of bills that was introduced by Representative Rob Matzey this session. He's the chairman of the Consumer Protection, Technology, and Utilities Committee. He introduced House Bills 1862 through 1865. So House Bill 1862 would strengthen the publicity requirements when an acquisition deal is submitted. So that way that people are aware of it ahead of time and they know what exactly it entails and if they're affected by it. There's House Bill 1863, which removes the 6-month Public Utility Commission evaluation deadline so that all necessary background checks and all necessary research can be made before the acquisition is potentially made. House Bill 1864 prohibits the use of one substantial rate increase. So like what I said earlier, if Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority was sold for $1 billion and the rates were to increase, if this legislation was passed, we couldn't get a 200% rate increase all at the beginning. It would have to be done gradually over time to give ratepayers enough time to acclimate to it and everything. So, and then House Bill 1865 says that an acquisition cost can't be more than 125% of the deprecated cost. So if a water and sewer authority is valued at $800 million, it can't be sold for $1 billion because then that would it doesn't make any sense and will lead to more rate increases. Unfortunately, that package of bills probably won't go through the session this year either, but the PUC themselves has taken several steps to kind of address some of these concerns that the public are having. They established public meeting requirements for any potential acquisitions and for any privately owned water and sewer systems. They enhanced their rate notifications if a ratepayer is going to receive a rate increase that they know of it way ahead of time. They also established a reasonable review ratio, which is kind of like a new criteria for the PUC to assess the fairness of acquisition prices to determine that it's in the best interest of the consumers. So yeah, like I said, that's still ongoing and there is some bipartisan support behind that. So we're definitely excited to continue that in the next couple of years. But so just kind of also moving on to another topic. So I know Tess mentioned earlier the Healthy Outdoors for All program. That's something that myself and Ezra and We Conserve PA and the broader Growing Greener Coalition have been working on for most of this year.
Keep going with that with the time check.
My 15 minutes up? Or?
You've gone about that, yes.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I'll be really quick. So the Healthy Outdoors for All program was renamed to the Pennsylvania Conservation Water and Outdoor Recreation Investment Act. And basically what this does is it has several different buckets of money that local and state parks and other entities can apply to for various different reasons. So one of the topics is water quality. So local municipalities and local parks can apply for funding for floodplain retention, water decontamination efforts, repairing forest buffers, stream bank corridors, that sort of thing. But even beyond the water quality aspects, there is one section is dedicated to agricultural stewardship. So farmland preservation is a big thing in Bucks County. There are about 247 farms that are preserved, which totals about 19,000 acres. But what the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture has said, there just simply isn't enough funding and resources to preserve all the farms they have in their queue. So this would invest another $150 million into addressing some of those backlogs that they have, because preserving a farm is very expensive. It's about $3,600 an acre. So if an average farm is several hundred acres, we're talking, several hundreds of millions of dollars. So this funding will kind of address that backlog a little bit so that if farmers want to take advantage of that, they're able to. I know I'm over, but I think that's about it for me. Conservation Voters of PA, you can go to our website. It's conservationpa.org. You can sign up for our email list. We do a lot of legislative and advocacy work all the time. So there's plenty of ways to get involved. And we actually do, in conjunction with Sierra Club and Clean Water Action and Clean Air Action, we do a legislative scorecard. So I actually brought some physical copies of them over there if you want to grab one. But basically, it's your way of seeing how exactly your state representative and your state senator voted this past legislative session on several different key bills I can go over today. But I think that's about it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm going to introduce Ezra in a second, but some of you noticed that the coffee has come out. I'm sorry we're a little bit late with that, but do feel free to get up. We'll help you wash your cookies down. And I'm going to introduce Ezra. So this is Ezra Thrush coming around. Ezra is the senior advisor for PennFuture. In this role, he advocates for strong environmental, energy conservation, and agriculture policy. Ezra previously served as the Shapiro administration's first policy director at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. I believe I had to cut things out to fit all this in here, so you've got to go to his website to really see the whole thing. But there, he worked closely with the Office of Governor Shapiro and the DEP executive staff to advance a host of issues, including environmental justice, permitting, clean and renewable energy, watersheds and drinking water, mining, the oil and gas program, air quality, PFAS, which we've heard about already tonight, climate and infrastructure. Please welcome Ezra Thrush.
As you can tell, we never did any work with the DEP. There's a joke in the 16th floor when I was working there that each day has about a week to a month of work. So you'd show up at 7 a.m. and be there oftentimes till 7 or 8 at night. And if the legislature's in town, you get an extra double fun. So the legislature always thinks that they have some good ideas. We're starting to get on the track of better ideas now that I think there's a bit more of an equitable division of who controls what in the legislature now. We do have divided legislature, so that creates some challenges. It's harder to pass legislation and policy, but it's not as it's not as extreme in the policies that do get passed now, which is maybe a good thing. So as Michael had said, I just worked at the DEP in the Gov's office for about 14 months. Before that, I was a lobbyist at PennFuture for just about 7 years. I was called to serve on the governor's transition team when he was joining, and he won his race. And that was really interesting. And they called me up and asked me to come and serve as a policy director at the DEP. But I realized I wanted to get back into advocacy and government affairs on the outside. So I'm on this new side of things again, just about 6 months now. So I have a little bit better perspective on the inside and how things get done on the official side, and how to make us all better advocates in the conservation and clean energy side of things. I want to just pick up kind of where Tim had left off with the Pennsylvania Conservation Water Outdoor Recreation Investment Act that we're working on. The third pillar that we're working on, Tim had mentioned the improving water quality and strengthening communities and watersheds pillar, and the empowering agriculture and land conservation pillar. We're also focusing on the pillar that's going to reinvest a lot of money, that we're going to reinvest money coming from a couple different funding mechanisms to put money behind rehabilitating, restoring, and building new infrastructure for our state parks and our state forests, our trails, and increasing money for outdoor recreation. As you might know, we now have a brand new outdoor recreation office in Pennsylvania that's housed at the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, which is really exciting. The governor is very, very interested and excited about outdoor recreation, so we're trying to harness that energy for our conservation purposes as well. We also are pushing for some big money for expanding our state trail system, and also trails that are owned and operated by local governments and by non-governmental organizations. Last year, the DCNR had asked for about $48 million to do that work. Unfortunately, we didn't get that across the finish line. So we're trying to take another bite at the apple and do $50 million for our public trail system.
What is DCNR, in case anybody doesn't know?
Yeah, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Thank you, Mike. I speak I have a bad habit of speaking in jargon. That's Harrisburgese. I live actually 2 blocks from the Capitol building. My office is across the street from the Capitol building. So if we're ever in a session day, I'm known to be inside the Capitol building for maybe 10 hours or 12 hours a day. So I have Harrisburgese. I need to hit out of me every so often. So I wanted to just mention a couple of the things we're talking about in the conservation space. We're doing a lot of work around agriculture, a lot of work around forest protection, a lot of work around buffers. We are working on a bill called House Bill 1275. Audubon is a co-sponsor in support of this bill, such as PennFuture conservation voters. This bill moved out of committee, had a committee hearing. We're probably not going to see any further action this session. There were some concerns with the Department of Agriculture and Department of Conservation and Natural Resources and DEP around some of the language. So we're going to tighten the language up and reintroduce it next session. But the idea behind it is, right now in Pennsylvania, we have a 100-foot forested riparian buffer rule. You can't build anything within 100 feet of a stream, creek, or river in Pennsylvania. And how many of you all know Pennsylvania waterways are public property, right? Did folks know that? Water belongs to all of us. Isn't that cool? I think it's the coolest thing. We've got to take care of that, though. So we're trying to pass a bill that increases that buffer from 100 feet to 325 feet, which is based on science, supported by Stroud Water Research Center down in Chester County. If you're familiar with the Stroud folks, they're pretty great. And it's come up against some fights, though. I think the builders associations aren't too big of fans of this issue. Some of the folks in the agriculture community are asking if we can get some exempted language here and there to make it a little bit nicer for them. So we're going to reintroduce a new language, work with the governor's office and the different agencies to move it through next session. We're hopeful that this forest riparian buffer bill requirement increase can move next session. So we're excited about that. A couple other issues I wanted to mention on the climate and clean energy space. Tess had mentioned the community solar legislation. That's a bill that we've been working on. It's been 8 years this year since I've been working on it. I thought maybe we could get it done this session. It looks like it may not happen, but you know what? One of my calling cards is I never call things done until it's over, and I always think I never say never to anything. That's one of my MOs. And we still have some legislative session left. There's not much left, like Tim had mentioned. We still have 3 legislative session days for both the House and the Senate, the week of the 21st of October. There's a rumor in Harrisburg that folks are going to cancel that session week, though, and they're going to go home early for the fall, get back to campaigning for the election on the 5th of November. But some folks, I had heard today, and this might be new to you, I had heard that some folks are thinking, hey, that might not look good, so maybe we should stay in Harrisburg for optics purposes only. For optics only, and then go back home. So they might still come around the session, but still maybe not do anything. So we'll see. So we're hopeful we get community solar done. This is really just changing a lot of legal and technical barriers that exist in Pennsylvania law currently for people to participate in community solar. A lot of states have this already, blue states, red states, rural states, urban states, and it allows for more people to participate in solar photovoltaic power generation. If you don't have $40,000 to get your own solar array, or if you live in multifamily housing or an apartment complex, it's really difficult in Pennsylvania to participate in solar. If we pass this legislation, we can remove some barriers that some of the utilities don't like. So the utilities have been fighting us for most of the part here. So that we can create these community solar gardens or solar panels in one area, and then everybody in the community can tap into it within a mile or 2 radius, depending on what the language says. And then folks can get credits off their monthly bills at the end of the month. Seems like a common sense piece of policy, right? We are the furthest we've ever been with this bill in the last 8 years, which is pretty exciting. We now only have a couple utility companies that are opposing us now, not the entire industry. We have the Farm Bureau who are advocating in the trenches hand in hand with us on this bill, which is really cool because they have a lot of connection to a lot of folks that maybe we don't get to talk to too well, or they're better messengers with other legislators. And we have the most Republican co-sponsors in this legislation we've ever had. So it's really exciting. The governor's office actually was doing work on this for a while. We have Republicans in the Senate who were pushing this, which is exciting. But at the end of the day, it's up to the chair of the Consumer Protection Committee in Senate, and it's up to the majority leader in the Senate. They control the committee and what they do. They control the calendar of the Senate. And those folks are pretty closely aligned with the folks who don't want the bill to pass. So we're going to keep working. I don't think we're done. I think we're going to get it done in next session. That's my hope. So community solar is really great, and it's going to do a lot to bring more power to Pennsylvania that's clean and renewable, and more people can participate in it. There's also a caveat in there, a little provision that helps lower income folks and environmental justice communities participate better in solar as well, which is exciting. Right now, a lot of folks who participate in solar are really folks who are a little bit more wealthy and have more resources. So we're curious about that and looking to keep working on that. I wanted to just mention a couple other pieces on solar and energy and climate. You might be familiar with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. This is a regulation to put in place a carbon trading program and set a carbon limit in Pennsylvania. That's just very technical gobbledygook to say that we're trying to combat our carbon emissions in Pennsylvania, and we're putting a regulation in place. In 2019, Governor Wolf had passed an executive order saying that he directed the DEP to go through the Regulatory Review Act process. It's about a 24-month process, if you're lucky, to do a regulation to put a cap on carbon and do a carbon limit. And any kind of money that comes out of, or proceeds that come out of that, through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a collaborative, we're working with 10 other states, those revenues can be reinvested back into our communities, either through workforce development, labor initiatives, folks who worked in dirty industry but are trying to work in clean and renewable industry, trying to get money towards environmental justice programs, money that can be reinvested into carbon emissions reduction strategies. Unfortunately, this regulation passed, it went through more than 24 months. I think it was almost 28 to 30 months of the regulatory process. And the Commonwealth Court got an injunction to put a stay on the regulation. So the regulation has been in court for the last few years. And the regulation is now, the court case on the regulation is now in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court had just heard arguments, full rounds of arguments on the merits and on, it's a tax and fee issue around the regulation. And we're expecting to hear a final decision as soon as May or June next year, if not early 2026. So we're still hanging around to see what happens with this regulation. The courts really matter, is all I will say. The Supreme Court seats that are up for election are up for an election next year, so don't forget to vote next year too. Hopefully we'll do another I Vote, I Vote event. We can focus on judicial candidates and local electeds like Tim. So that's hanging out there. All that to say, it's kind of like a Damocles sword hanging over the Pennsylvania General Assembly right now. It's hard to do a whole lot of other energy policy. That's a really good energy policy because folks still want to know what's going on with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Folks are using it as a leverage point in negotiations to say, well, if the Supreme Court turns us over, we don't have to do clean energy stuff. We can go back to doing things the way we've always done it in Pennsylvania. But a lot of folks really want us to turn the page and move forward and join all the states around us, including West Virginia and Ohio, who now have 30% solar targets. Pennsylvania is trying to move that way. Pennsylvania has something called the Energy Programs Office at the DEP that has climate impact assessment and it has climate plans for Pennsylvania to get us to 100% zero emissions energy by 2050. Unfortunately, we need the legislature to go along with the plan and to pass policies that get us to get us there. The governor, to his credit, has put out two plans earlier this year. I think it was March this year. The governor has two energy plans. One is called PRESS, or the Pennsylvania Reliable Energy Sustainability Standards, and PACER, the Pennsylvania
Climate Emissions Reduction Program.
Thank you. This is why Tim and I work well together. So they go kind of hand in hand. PACER, or the Pennsylvania
Climate Emissions Reduction Program.
This is part of our bid. We practiced this for hours earlier today. This is legislation to basically codify everything that the RGGI regulation does. RGGI, the carbon trading program, we're doing that through the regulatory space and the administrative law space, right? You can also codify things. You put it through the General Assembly, through the House and the Senate. The governor signs it, right? That's really good. That's good as golden. That's codified into state law. You really can't challenge that unless it's constitutionally stronger. But we're not going to get there anytime soon. But that's a lot better than just through executive order and through regulation. Through the administrative route, right? It's stronger, much more durable. So we're trying to pass this program, but at the same time, groups like mine, we still really like this regulation. We think the Supreme Court should support the regulation, should uphold the decision that it's good, and let us keep cutting our carbon emissions and let us bring revenues from proceeds from the auctions of our trading of the credits and reinvest that money back in Pennsylvania. Now, the first piece I talked about was the PRESS, the Pennsylvania Reliable Energy Sustainability Standards. We should have probably named that something differently. The funny thing is, before I came back over to the advocacy side, I worked on the governor's energy plan in my role in the policy department of DEP and with the governor's office. And this bill basically updates and expands something we had called in Pennsylvania the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards. You might have heard of AEPS before. Basically, what this does is it's a rebate program or tax credit program, and it incentivizes Pennsylvania spending having so much energy from different kinds of energy sources. For the longest time in Pennsylvania history, we had our energy came straight from coal. After a while, we had oil, and after oil, we had gas. And we're trying to get more other kinds of energy that are clean, and we prefer renewable. But PennFuture in particular, we're generally okay with some nuclear because it's carbon-free energy. I know there's disagreement in the conservation and environmental world about that, but we need to move towards carbon-free energy. What we can't do is allow for preferential policy support to continue to happen in Harrisburg that only supports gas industry, that only supports coal. We only have 2 coal plants left in Pennsylvania. The gas industry is now about 56% market share of all of our energy sources in Pennsylvania. I don't think that's acceptable for a number of reasons, not just climate and energy reasons, but also because we should maybe have a diverse portfolio of our energy resources for a security argument as well. And so nuclear used to be 42%, now it's in the 20-something% range. We had a couple parts of our fleet that went offline over the last few years. But what we really need to do is to increase our renewables. We can do it. Solar right now and wind right now are the cheapest they've ever been done. What we need to do is significantly to ramp up our renewables. So solar and wind, we need to get that done in Pennsylvania. Solar even more so than wind. Wind has some concerns as well. But solar is cheap. Solar can be done. We should be putting solar on every warehouse, every rooftop, distributed generation, utility scale, on homes, wherever we can put solar, we should be doing it, as long as it's sited correctly, of course. We had opposed a solar installation project up in the Poconos, I think it was maybe a couple years ago. I think CPA, you guys were with us on that?
2022.
Yeah, Swiftwater project is what it was called. It was taking away pretty significant forested areas, several acres, and when I say several, I mean like dozens to maybe 100 acres of pristine forested area that were headwaters streams that were high quality and exceptional value streams, if you're familiar with the Clean Streams Law in Pennsylvania. And so we opposed the project. You might think, oh, a green group, why are you opposing a solar project? Well, you can't be ruining our streams, you can't be ruining our pristine forests. Same thing in our ag land. I grew up in very, very rural Pennsylvania. I grew up in Franklin County, if anybody's familiar. It's near Gettysburg. We have a lot of folks that are buying up agricultural property and putting solar fields in. That's fine. A lot of dairy industry isn't very good right now. The markets are very, very short. The margins are short for profit, and a lot of farms and families are trying to do that to support their industry. But the problem is, a lot of folks are concerned that we're going to take away prime agricultural land. So we're trying to figure that out. Before I came back over to the advocacy side, I worked with Department of Agriculture and Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to put forward a Commonwealth solar siting policy. So there are folks in the governor's office and in the administrations who are trying to figure that out. What is a sensible Commonwealth-wide policy on solar siting? We got to do it the right way. We need to wildly ramp it up and increase solar as much as we can because climate is a big concern, but we got to do it the right, responsible, mindful way. I think I might just be about done.
You're good?
I'm going to say...
We're not done with any of you.
Okay.
Yet, but,
I have a couple of thoughts, but I know that we have some questions, so that might lead to some conversation.
So everyone, it's not
Yeah.
time to go to the bathroom and get another cookie if you want to. Thank you, Ezra. And we're gonna reconfigure to a panel setup, so that may take us just a minute. So Tess, do you need
Perfect, that's great.
You know,
Thank you.
I was asking where coffee wasn't coming over, so I appreciate you guys have to. I think all the local stuff is closed by the time I got to town.
thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. Do we want to move the chairs in a little bit?
getting cold? I'll close the door. Just a little too.
Maybe you can, if you don't mind connecting the, where's that?
We did, yes.
I was gonna say, it's been a challenge right now.
Yeah, my state senator is Derek Gold, so. It's Bucks, he's a 10%. So I was lucky.
Is it just the three of us?
Yeah.
So I think we've been broadcasting this whole time.
Perfect.
So if everyone's ready, we'll get going again.
Great.
And continue to get cookies as you like.
It's like a coffee house chat.
And that's sort of what I want it to be like. I just have a few questions for you both, but I really want to leave time for you all if you have questions and anything else that you didn't get to. So I think I'll start, and you both sort of touched on this, but if you want to expand at all, what do you see leading the environmental policy landscape in 2025? But also, what are you most excited about? And then what will need some extra push from advocates?
It's a good one. So I'm definitely most excited about the conservation water and outdoor recreation bill that we've been working on. I didn't get to give the full spiel on it, but that would invest about $1.2 billion into our recreation industry and preserving more land, protecting more waterways. Like, it is a very significant piece of legislation. And like I said, we have a lot of existing programs already, like the Environmental Stewardship Funds, the Community Conservation Partnership Grant, but they just simply don't have enough money to sustain all of the requests that we're getting. So this way, we can definitely help upgrade some more local parks. We can restore some more state parks, which I've seen a lot of infrastructure degradation in the last year. So I'd say I'm most looking forward to that. I mean, it's something that the governor is huge on. He did his Great American Outdoors road trip back in the summer to highlight our outdoor recreation industry. And we have our 250. We can invest more money into historical and cultural sites as well.
And I'll just add, I think we're gonna have to eat our Wheaties for that next year because that's gonna be a bit of a push.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to add on, we're trying to get this bill passed through the next year, not just next session. Sessions in Harrisburg are 2 years, 2 calendar years. We're trying to get this passed by maybe next August so that it can get put on the ballot for the fall. So this is a little bit different of a bill. We're trying to do this through ballot referendums, so we've got to get it out to Pennsylvania voters. So we're trying to get it done and get it on the ballot for Pennsylvania voters for next fall. This investment back into these issues. So it's pretty big. So we're going to be doing a lot of work on that. The only other thing I think I'll add, I'm really excited about keeping pushing on the press bill. This bill is something I've been working on for a long time. It was passed in 2004 originally, the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards, and it plateaued out the rebates, funds, and the incentives for the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards. It plateaued and expanded the incentives for the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards.